Thank you, Nick. Bore da, good morning, everybody. I'm Alan Jones. I'm an international trade advisor based up in North Wales.
Right, hold on. Who's it? Oh, is this Martin?
Can I ask?
You were in on another line. I'm in the middle of a meeting. I'll get into answer. All right, cheers.
Can I ask the delegates to switch off their video cameras and microphones, please? Diolch yn fawr. And the gentleman who's just come back to his screen, can I ask you to turn your microphone and camera off, please?
Microphone and camera. Okay.
Yes, please.
Let me have a little look.
Bore da, good morning, everybody. As I mentioned previously, I'm Alan Jones, International Trade Advisor, based up in North Wales. I'm part of a team of 6 that covers the whole of Wales. At the end of the session, there'll be a question and answer session for everybody. And also we'll be sending out the evaluation forms following the presentations this morning. Additionally, the presentation is being recorded and will be placed up on our export zone for you to access it at a future date at your own pace. Diolch yn fawr am ymuno ni. Dwi wedi gofyn I bawb diffod eu camrau a'i microphones. Mi fydd yr sesiwn cael ei recordio a bydd y slides yn cael ei anfon allan ar y diwedd. If you want to contact any of the International Trade Advisors team, then please do so in the feedback forms and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. I'm now going to pass over to Gavin, who is going to give the presentation. As you can see from the agenda, it's a very full hour, so there's a lot to take in. It's a very complex subject and there's a lot to cover. So over to Gavin. Thank you, Gavin.
Okay, I'll just share my screen now so that I can use my pointer. One moment. Okay, so I think everybody can see that. Okay, so I'm going to be talking at you for an hour, so apologies for that. And there's a lot to cover. So as I say, there is a recording and there will be handout slides too. So in brief, what we're going to be covering here, we're going to start with a welcome introductions. We're going to introduce international trade just to set the scene and give you some sort of context. And then we're going to focus on lots of the nuts and bolts of international trade. So you've decided to export already, or indeed import. A lot of this will apply to imports too. And now it's, well, what do I need to do practically? So we're going to cover as many important fundamentals in the shortest time as possible. These are frontline items. So we're going to cover Incoterms rules, really important to get that right in your sales and purchase contracts. We're going to do an introduction to customs, what is it, why is it important? And then we're going to talk about the 4 technical aspects of customs compliance: classification, valuation, origin and customs procedure codes. This will all make sense as we go through. Then we're going to talk about just a slide on customs tax planning, how you can save import taxes. Now these may support your subsequent exports, so we're going to cover that too in one slide. Prohibitions and restrictions, a word on that, a few tips of compliant management, and don't worry, at the end there we'll have a kind of a checklist. So we'll circle back and all the previous content will be covered in the checklist at the end, okay? Now, as I say, some of the final items will make more sense after the beginning items, of course, but some of the beginning items will make more sense after the final items. So if you did read back through the slides later, I highly recommend that. It will all make amplify the benefit of the session. Okay, so quick welcome. I won't bore you too much about me, except for I spent 20 years as supply chain manager, head of logistics compliance, all those sorts of roles there. So I've been there and done it. You guys, I now do some consultancy training and ongoing support and coaching for companies. What we're doing today, as I mentioned here, we're focusing on export operations as a theme. okay, because imports are important too, and you need to know what your customers in Europe and elsewhere need to do. So you need to understand what they're doing, and if you are importing yourselves, this will be beneficial too. Help you begin to recognise the relevant risks and opportunities, so that's a real key thing here. Cover as many important fundamentals in the shortest time as possible. Now, some of these items, like Incoterms, could be a whole half day or even a whole day course. So we are getting down to the real gritty of it, the key aspects that you need to know. So really important to you now, or maybe in the future if you're not exporting much at the moment. And we're going to try to attempt to cover for newcomers. So for you guys, it might be awareness, and for experience as well. So if you're experienced already, hopefully we'll add some context here for you as well. And anybody involved in imports and exporting, particularly exporting, important for those guys. But also, if you're working within businesses that do import or export in the future, potentially, depending where your careers take you, it's going to be important for that too. So, okay, so we're going to start off. I'm going through this quite fast. I'm going to be talking a little bit fast just to get things covered properly and leave more time for questions at the end. Introduction to international trade. So to set the scene, 3 slides here. In all, we've got 20 slides of information. Okay, I'm not going to mention every word on the slides. It's there for people who like the detail and people to look back upon. I'm going to pull out verbally the key points for you, but anything else is additional information just in case. Okay, so I want it to be useful to you later when I've sort of long gone. So first thing is, international trade is important for traders, consumers and governments, vitally important for fiscal development of countries. Okay, the problem is on the right hand side, and I will use my points for quite a bit, the costs, risks and obligations involved are often unwittingly overlooked. You've got lots of customs taxes depending upon product and depending upon country, whether there's a free trade deal, international freight charges, logistical complexity. If you're delivering a pallet from London to Birmingham or Wales to Birmingham, easy, isn't it? Delivery notes, invoice, £50, no problem at all. As soon as you go international, it gets a bit more complicated here. And then you've got arduous regulations for the uninitiated. So that's the key thing we're going to be focused on quite a bit today, as well as the bewildering paperwork for the uninitiated too. So as a business at high level, strategic level, you should be focused on controlling your costs, risks and obligations. So I keep saying that, cost, risks and obligations, they're the important bits on there. Trading within the rules is vitally important. To do that, you need to invest in know-how, capability and procedures, which is what you're doing now, effectively. So this will give you a signal in terms of what you might need to do within the business, but it's just as important to understand what isn't relevant to you. So think of this session as a checklist. And as we work down all the different modules, when you do Incoterms, take your hat off and then put your customs hat on. So we're going to do it as bite-sized chunks as we work through the hour, okay? But these are all generally really important fundamentals that a lot of even multi-million, big corporations get wrong quite frequently. So yeah, main point from that, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, okay? If it was easy, you're going to have 10 times as many competitors. So it's really important to get this area right. So domestic and international, as I say, it's different. Before Brexit, we had 3 types of trade: domestic, EU, and what we called third country trade. That's international trade. We call it third country trade. The EU has now, of course, moved with Brexit into this third country circle here. So now we only have domestic and third country trade. Probably the only thing that's become easier after Brexit. So as soon as you get into third country trade, all of these things apply on the left hand side in green here. Import customs duty increases the price of a product. Import VAT 20%, high price you can often get back if you're set up properly. Customs declarations, we'll cover that later. 54-box legal declarations, totally your responsibility, not your freight forwarder. Security safety declarations, product regulations and sales VAT considerations. All of that applied to international trade. None of it applied to the single market when we're part of the EU. It all applies now to the EU trade because the EU has moved into third country trade. The only thing the free trade deal does, at number 5 there, is remove import duty, the top one, in limited circumstances, which we'll cover later, if your goods meet the rules of origin. If it's not manufactured in the UK, you probably can't use the trade deal. Okay, and just to give you a bit of a feel for this, UK customs declarations, we had 50 million before Brexit, is now 300 million. Because of course we've got 250 million for EU trade, inbound and outbound. We also have international traders, 200 before Brexit, now we have 350 million. There's 150 million, we're only dealing with intra-EU trade. Intra-EU trade here was not international until now. So only now is it true importing and exporting, okay? So So as I say, the free trade agreement, all that does is import customs duty in limited circumstances, which we'll cover. And beware of the bottom there. You may understand everything, but your customers in the EU or your suppliers in China or anywhere else, they may not understand. So you've got to protect your bubble, protect your business, and that's what this is all about. Okay, so the main point from that, is third country trade now. And even the free trade deal doesn't really do much effectively. So the last slide in this section of introduction, how do we frame international trade in our minds? How do we get those mind juices flowing? So to kick this off, I'm going to mention the 4 contracts of international trade. And if you think about these 4 contracts and you've ticked them off in your minds or on paper, you're probably doing quite a good job. So that's the first thing, just to try and frame it. And they are the sales contract between buyer and seller. Okay, that could be a multi-page agreement, 80 pages. It could be an email with a paragraph in there or 1-page order form, doesn't matter. There's a sales contract between buyer and seller, and Incoterms fall within the sales contract, which we'll cover soon. Okay, nothing to do with the carriage contract, completely the sales contract, okay, between buyer and seller. Allied to that, you've got a finance contract. So you may do open account here, so you pay and someone pays you 60, 30, 90 days later, or you may do cash in advance, whatever you want to do. But of course, there's a risk there for the seller and buyer. So you can protect your finances by using letters of credit, which some of you would have heard of, where you get banks involved to secure your payments overseas because of this increased concerns about trust. But there's a finance contract there, whichever way you look at it, and that's an important document of international trade alongside the sales and purchase contract. Then you're going to have cargo insurance, if you think about it, because you've got all that increased time, distance and handling loss and risk of damage in transit. Okay, this insurance, cargo insurance, doesn't cover delays, it doesn't cover quality issues, it covers damage and loss in transit. And there could be a 4-week transit from China, for instance. Okay, the EU is going to be shorter when you export it. But of course, you need to cover it yourselves because the carrier, the logistics provider, they only have limited liability by value and scope. They don't cover a lot. And of course, the values are limited. So for example, between £2 and £19 a kilo. So if you're moving something by road, £2.28 per kilo, it might be covered by your freight forwarder. Okay. And even then, it's hard to claim against. There's a lot of things it doesn't cover. So normally, a trader will get their own marine cargo insurance. And just to give you a bit of a feel, there's details to take away. There's basically 3 levels of cover here. If you're dealing with manufactured products, like most people do, you'll be wanting cargo clauses A, which is full cover down here. So just a point of concern, who is covering those goods in transit and at which point? Incoterms will feed into that soon. And then you've got your carriage contract. That's your logistical one, isn't it, with your freight forwarder? And it may include customs instructions as well, because customs comes in the middle of that. So effectively, it does a lot of things here, a lot of important items here. But all of these 4 contracts are interwoven. So you have to make sure they're not inconsistent. You might have John Smith dealing with sales contracts, Jane Smith deals with the cargo insurance, and Mike Smith deals with carriage. There's no point arranging a carriage contract that doesn't comply with Incoterms in the sales contract. So it's really important to get these 3 contracts consistent, should I say. But it's also a good way of thinking about international trade at the outset. Have I covered these things off somehow or some form? Okay. So that was a whistle-stop tour of international trade. It's important. All those international rules, customs duties, taxes, formalities that we need to do. It's not just about the taxes, it's taxes and formalities. And people forget about the formalities, the complexities. The money is easy. It's not good, but it's easy. The tax and the formalities, that's the hard bit. Okay. So we take that hat off and we're now moving on to Incoterms. So we're going to go bang, 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 all the way down these key areas. Incoterms could be a whole half-day course. Very important thing to learn, okay? I would say the single most important item to get right and to nail, hence the bottom here. 85% of companies get them wrong, okay? Even major companies, people just don't know. They're international commercial terms, Incoterms, on the 2020 edition at the top here. But per number 2, they've been going on since 1936, updated every 10 years to reflect changing trade practice. We didn't use shipping containers, those metal boxes, until after the war, for instance. They can also be used for domestic trade. Top right corner here, that's part of the cover of the book. Because when you use the 3-letter acronym, FCA, seller, road here, every Incoterm will be a 3-letter acronym, there's 11 of them. You've actually got the force of a 180-page book behind it. So you may or may not know that, but buy the book and understand it. if you don't have, if you're using that three-letter acronym, don't just use it willy-nilly. You have to make sure that you understand what you're signing up to. They're legally binding, okay, so you have to apply them in the contract precisely. You have to put Incoterms 2020. If you don't put these words after the Incoterm in your contract, they don't apply. It becomes a jargon term. So you've got to make sure it's applied correctly in the sales contract and purchase contract, not the carriage contract, nothing to do with the carrier, freight forwarder, for B2B goods, business to business transactions, okay? And they divide many costs, risks and obligations between buyer and seller very precisely. And if you look to the right-hand side of that slide, in the book, it's broadly laid out in this structure here. So although it's part of the sales contract, have a look down here. What constitutes delivery and taking delivery? Is it when you load it on the truck, or is it when your truck just arrives there ready for unloading? We'll cover that in a minute. Transfer of risks. Who's going to take out the carriage contract? And to what point exactly? Who's going to get that insurance under a couple of Incoterms and to what level? Okay. Who's going to provide a transport document? Big one here. Who's going to do the export, import and transit customs clearance? Who's going to check it? Yeah, packaging, packaging and marketing. It covers a lot of stuff. It's not just a delivery term. As I say, it's a commercial term. So just make sure you have a good understanding of the 11 terms. Bit of a spoiler alert. If you're a business, maybe pick 3 or 4 that's applicable to your business and make those your terms in your contract and don't allow any others unless they get signed off by the person in your business that understands them. So just a quick tip there. We will be providing a lot of tips as we go through, as you'll see. So they don't substitute a complete sales contract. They cover a lot of stuff, guys, but they don't cover like payment terms or court jurisdiction. But overall, they help to avoid misunderstandings. So if you're a small business dealing with £1 million company, selling to a purchaser in the EU, sorry, a £100 million company in the EU, and there's a delay, there's demurrage, or something goes wrong with products, you don't want to have an argument with that company, do you? It's a big business. They've got lots of business with you. But what you don't have to anymore, you can say, well, look at page 5, chapter 4, Incoterms. It's your cost. I'm really sorry, guys. It's not my fault. Incoterms says it. So it allows you to pass that blame onto the book because it's very precise. So really important to get that right, okay? 2 more slides on Incoterms. This is the messiest slide of the set, but again, it's there to reference back a little bit. And it's also good at international trade awareness. If you understand Incoterms, you really understand international trade operations quite well. So if we look at supply chain here, you're a seller here in Wales, you might be going to the EU at the bottom here, or replace that with China or the US, doesn't really matter. If you're also buying, guys, put your sales at the bottom here and put your supplier at the top, whether they're in the EU or China. But there's a lot of things here. You've got exporter paperwork in international trade, certificates of origin, invoices, bills of lading, things like that they have to do. You've got pre-carriage in blue in the seller's country, because every journey starts and ends in a road journey, remember? You might be thinking, oh, I'm sending it air freight or sea freight, but you're not really. You're sending it road air road, or road sea road. So you've got pre-carriage fare, main carriage and non-carriage. Then you've got all these customs bits here. So we'll come to later. These are big pieces of big items here. See these yellows here, the export entry, the import entry. For every export entry you do, there'll be a subsequent import. For every import you do, there's a previous export. I know it sounds obvious, but it's a good way of looking at it. You may be responsible for one of those, none of those, or both of those, depending upon your Incoterm. So you have to make sure you get it right. These 4 here are marine only use those for sea freight, just as a side note there. The other modes can be for any mode of transport, the dark blue ones. And there's a short summary, as I say, it's a half, this is one slide, okay? So this is where delivery and risk passes, very precisely. So X works, ready to load here in your warehouse at your premises in Wales. FCA, you have to load it on the vehicle. So as soon as you load it on the back of the vehicle, curtains open, that's it, I'm done, I've delivered, I'm doing Incoterms legally. And so on and so forth, all the way down here, okay? The 2 common terms for EU trade, which is what we hear for exports, are FCA, okay, that's when the customer collects, and DAP when you deliver to an EU customer. And the reason for that is under number 1 and 2 here. This is really important, guys. X works in DDP. The 2 extremes, X works is the minimum obligations on the seller, but therefore maximum on the buyer. And DDP at the bottom is maximum on the seller and minimum on the buyer, think of it that way. But both of the X works and DDP are recommended for domestic trade only. Because if you're delivering from Wales to the EU here, DDP for instance, you can't get it into the EU unless you've got an EORI number customs ID, which we'll cover later, a VAT number to reclaim VAT, and a registration. Same the other way around. If someone picks up from that customer probably don't have an UK EORI number customs ID to be a legal exporter record. So it doesn't work. I recommend it for local trade as well. So if you're using XWorks, FCA is the natural equivalent. If you're using DDP, DAP is the natural equivalent. But you need to do a bit more work on there and understand which ones you want to do. Okay. So yeah, two of the terms, CIF and CIP, have a bit of an insurance obligation on there. And notice the yellow text here. People don't realise this. The C group terms, there's 4 groups, E, F, C and D. The C groups, although you arrange carriage to the destination ports here, okay, the risk actually passes the same as when you're on the F terms. All right, so just a bit of a, this is a bit of a takeaway slide for those that have some knowledge, but if you don't have any knowledge of Incoterms, just get clued up on it, use this as a guide and have a think about what you're signing up to, because you don't just sell products, you're selling a whole products and service offer and all those costs, risks and obligations that go with it. Okay, that's what you're selling, not the products on your website, all the stuff that goes with it, insurance, carriage, getting it on time, customs clearance, compliance, all those sorts of things there. So final slide on Incoterms. Quick tips. I won't go over all of these. As I say, I'm not going to mention everything on the slides. It's there for reference for those that want more detail. But basically, make sure you understand what you're signing up to by using that 3-letter acronym. Okay. Oddly, it's part of the sales contract and purchase contract. So who should understand it most? The sales guys and purchase guys. Normally, I find most businesses don't have a good grasp at all, and the people that do understand it most are in logistics. It's a bit back to front, isn't it? It's one of those weird nuances. So the sales and purchase people need to understand it. Consider the cost, risks and obligations you're signing up to. Make sure they're practical. If you can't do an import clearance, in a legal import into the EU, it can't be DDP, and so on and so forth. And draft them correctly. Make sure you've got Incoterms 2020 on there. This one here, you might be dealing with an EU customer. They might sign up for the right Incoterms, so you're contractually secure. But just maybe go a little bit of a step further. If they're new to international trade, they're one of those companies that have never imported before, you might want to ask questions and say, by the way, do you understand this Incoterm? Do you know how to do the import clearance? Do you have a customs ID? So you can go that little bit step further. If they're a big distributor, global distributor, you're probably going to be fine. If they're a small manufacturer, it may be a problem. And then, yeah, I mentioned the terms again, and control your internal negotiators. You don't have to be an expert in all 11. Maybe pick the ones that are relevant to your business and be an expert in those 3 or 4 and set that as policy in your business. Okay, so that gives you a bit of a feel for Incoterms, but the main point is understand those. Honestly, they are really so important. If you get that wrong, you go off on the wrong path, you go down a rabbit warren elsewhere and you get customs wrong and other things. So we take the Incoterms hat off and we're now on customs, okay? So we're drilling down into the border. Those yellow men we saw on the graphic, we're now looking at those border processes. A lot happens at that border. For every import and export, there is a 54-field legal declaration. Looks something like that if you print it on the right-hand side. Okay, every import and export. Okay, they are completely, number 3, your responsibility. They are not the logistics provider or customs provider responsibility. All they do is type it in on your behalf, pay about £45 maybe. It's your legal responsibility, and we'll see why that makes sense in a minute. So you have to make sure you give written instructions and tell them what you want. There's a lot of regulations behind it. I won't bore you too much, but at World Trade Organization level and World Customs Organization level, it's like 30,000 pages. In the UK, there's a few thousand pages of regulations and guidance behind the boxes on this entry. Now, although there's 54 boxes, some are more important than others, so don't worry too much, okay? And the 4 most important ones are what we're covering in a minute. Classification, valuation, origin, customs procedure code. And then we're going to cover prohibitions and restrictions as well. Okay, and just remember number 4, this applies to anything crossing a border. So you might have, oh, Jane Smith's brilliant at customs, she knows everything, and she's handling all my exports of the commercial products I sell. But what about if you're sending trade show items, or you've got a return, or sending goods out for repair? All these different things, they have to be declared too, okay? They've got to have a value as well. There's no commercial value, but they've got to be handled in exactly the same way, under exactly the same compliance protocols as your commercial goods. So just be aware of anything you move across a physical border, including the EU, make sure all the stuff we covered today are kind of ticked off, or you've proactively excluded it as it's not relevant to your business. That's absolutely fine. So at the bottom here, principles apply globally. Just to give you a bit of a high level feel, some background, I think context is important. All the rules are set, most of the rules are set at WTO level, then they get ratified in different countries. So all the stuff we covered today, if you're going to sit in Japan and work in China, the same principles apply, the documents will be different. So we take it from World Customs Organization, customs then control it here. It's not just about the money, guys. Export entry is important as import entries. It's all for statistics, controls and licensing as well. So you have to get imports and exports right. And the other two bodies, which I just want to call out, are Border Force, do more physical checks, and Department of International Trade do rules of origin and free trade deals around the world, including the EU one. So they're the three sort of main bodies, but underneath them, you've got all these other government departments, probably about 20 or so key ones. These are the key ones here, depending on the industry you're working in. So if you're working in chemicals, you're going to be responsible. If you're working in medicine, you're going to be responsible for MHRA. If you're working in food, you've got DEFRA, haven't you? So you have to understand the rules around your particular products. But these government departments feed into HMRC, who police trade for them. Okay. So when we talk about customs and border, just think about HMRC, but behind the scenes, you've got these guys feeding in as well. Okay, so that's what happens at the border there, at a high level. So, okay, so sip of water. As I say, there's a lot of coverage, me talking at you, so apologies if I'm burning your ears off, but these are all important things to understand generally. So now I'm going to go into about customs entry a little bit more. Okay, the 4 pillars of customs compliance. So that's the way I like to frame it. When I framed international trade by the 4 contracts, sales, finance, insurance and carriage, I'm going to now frame customs into the 4 pillars. It's a good way of thinking about it. Classification, valuation, origin, classification, origin, valuation, and customs procedure code. Okay, so on that customs declaration, there's about 7 boxes we're going to call out here. 1, 2, 3, 4 pillars: the roof, the ORI number, special procedures and product controls and licenses. So what we're saying is, an EORI number is a unique customs ID introduced in 2009, so customs can watch what you're doing, imports and exports. Okay, you need one to import or export, to and from the UK, and you need one in the EU, or the customer does, to import into the EU, etc., etc. So once you know your EORI number is being used, probably determined by Incoterms and whether you're responsible for that customs entry, i.e. FCA you are for the export entry from the UK, ex-works you're not. Once you've got that and you put the roof on, you've got to make sure that you now got all those 4 pillars to hold up that roof, because it's now your legal responsibility. Okay, your legal responsibility, not the customs broker. So now they want to find out, who is the exporter importer? That's you, your EORI number. That's how it's determined on the customs entry. What is it? Customs classification. We'll do a slide on these in a minute, okay, because they're important. So what is it? Where does it originate? So does it come from the EU, China, and everything else? Not always from where it's shipped from. Okay. What's it worth for valuation? Okay, I'm paying 6% import duty, or your customer might be. Remember, we're doing exports here, but your customer might be paying import duty, so it's good to know what's happening. It might select which markets you can go to. There's a free trade deal, make an import duty free. It could be a better market for you. And then why is it being imported or exported? If it's coming back as a return, I shouldn't pay tax on it. We'll cover that later. If I'm sending something out, it's going to come back later because it's going out for repair. I shouldn't pay tax on it when it comes back. So there's things like that these 4 pillars will tell you. And regardless of these 4 pillars, which you have to get right legally, think about, you might want to use a special customs procedure or relief. So yes, I'm importing, say, and I've got a tax to pay, but I might be able to overrule the tax because I'm using a special procedure like bonded warehouse, and we'll cover that in a minute. Okay. And regardless of what I'm importing or exporting, it might be 10 kilos or a ton or 10 tons. There could still be a license or control based upon the product. Is it legal at the bottom there? Okay. So we're going to cover these in slides over the next part of this session. Okay, because we're drilling down into that customs border. We started high level, Incoterms, more awareness, and now we're coming down to customs, because all these things are different. They're all there for international trade, and therefore they all apply to the EU. Okay. Okay. Classification. Okay, you can do a whole half-day course, or you can just do this one slide and some tips at the end. Yeah. So basically, every product has a code. There can only be one code. There isn't 2, and you can choose. There's got to be 1. Okay, it's a codified way to identify the class of goods. There's over 20,000 codes here. Duty in the UK can be 0 to 14%. They can exceed 40% in exceptional circumstances, bites from China, anti-dumping duties. But 6% is quite common. 12%, 14% for a t-shirt, 6% for chemicals, depending where you are. Increase the price of the product. It's a significant area of non-compliance. Unfortunately, it's one of the pillars. You've got to get it right. It's because opinions can vary. Number 4. And if I jump to the bottom, and I said to you, we're not talking here. It's a short session. But is that a ceiling fan or a light? I'm guessing some of you have different opinions. If you're all customs officers, you will also have different opinions. Okay. If you're in the USA, that would be classified as a fan, ceiling fan. If you're in the UK, it's a light. So you can't use your supplier code. That could be wrong on the invoice. You need to classify it under your borders, your EOI number. You've got to classify it. You might use supplier codes as a starting point, but you've got to make sure it's correct. So yeah, so that's it. This one here, stick on kids' earrings. Is that a toy or artificial jewelry? Different tax rates. You know, so that's important too. And these toys at the bottom here, one of those is classified differently. And just for need for speed, it's Batman. Because Batman doesn't have any special powers, does he? He's human and he uses gadgets. All the others are mutants. So they can't be classified as dolls representing humans. So it's a different commodity code. Okay, so you don't need to know that, but if you're in a toy sector, you do. So you've got to be careful and understand what your classifications are. There's an example on the right hand side what the book looks like. You have a section and it goes down into more and more detail. Just for interest, the higher the chapter, there's 98 chapters, i.e. the first 2 digits here, 08. The higher the number, generally speaking, there's loads of exceptions, the higher the number is normally the more manufactured the product is and the higher the duty rate. Okay, so you start off with like base metals and commodities and fruit, you know, at the low numbers, 07 and stuff like that. And then you move down to real manufactured items, clocks and watches, got higher numbers. And the duty rate increases as you go down. Now, of course, there's exceptions. Some food is expensive. And now, when you talk about commodity code, you need 8 digits for export, see at the bottom here, and 10 digits for import. Okay, so 8 for export, 10 for import, and you can see a number at the bottom. This is a number 0805102220. The more you can move down the numbers, the more detailed it gets. Okay, and the last 4 digits are national, first 6 digits are internationally harmonised. The choices are harmonised. Global level, yes, there's a fan, there's a light in there, but countries might say it's something different. Okay, but the numbers available are the same at 6-digit level. But national in the UK, we have different codes. Okay, we have the same codes as the EU at the moment, but over time they'll probably deviate slightly. Now, of course, it's your customer's responsibility to classify in the EU when goods go out there, but you know, you want to be aware of this. So yeah, and the harmonised system is a World Customs Organisation. That's who make the harmonised system. Technically speaking, it's a harmonised system chapter, heading, subheading, and then you come down here to the commodity code. Okay, people call it different things: commodity code, tariff code, HS code. People normally mean it interchangeably. Like we're just talking about, they want the code. But for your information, you need 8 digits for export, 10 for import. If you're only exporting, your database at 8 digits will probably be fine. If you're importing 2, you need the 10, but you'll only use the 8 digits for anything you're exporting. Okay, so that's the level there. The more, don't relax on the final digits. Very important to get that right. Yeah, so very important to get right there on classification. Okay, well, I'll give you some tips at the end of this section. So that's classification. So we'll get rid of that pillar, and now we're moving on to valuation. Again, very important. It's one of the pillars, has to be. Now for export, the cost to the overseas purchaser, or if there's no sale price, the cost they would fetch is the valuation. It's a bit easy for exports, okay? And that's what we're mainly here for, exports to the EU. But you need to understand the imports a little bit as well, just to add a bit of value. If your imports, it's based upon the last sale price before it reaches the border, coming into the UK, okay? And there's 6 methods on the right-hand side. 90% of the time, transaction value, there's a bona fide sale between a seller and a buyer. That's a starting point for valuation, okay? If you're not doing that, you've got to think about these other ones and be a bit more careful about these other methods of valuation. You can't just make up arbitrary valuations, number 2. There's got to be a process behind it. It's more complicated for imports. Just for those that are importing or might do in the future, or to understand what your customers in the EU need to do, they've got to basically declare the CIF value, which is cost, insurance and freight to the EU border. So if they're buying FCA, £10,000, and they're collecting from you, they've got to manually add the freight and the insurance to the customs broker to make sure they add it onto the valuation. Because, you know, if they're collected from you, they've got to add that freight on. Same for you if you're buying from overseas. You know, you're collecting from you. Import VAT is 20%, you get it back. VAT, you pay it on via bulk and also the local freight. I won't go into there. And there's adjustments as well upon imports mainly. So I'm not going to veer too much onto imports. But the key thing to understand about valuation, 2 things I would say, is well, actually, I'll do one thing. The price paid or actually payable. If you're importing, what am I paying for those goods? If I've got an invoice in January, an invoice in March, an invoice in December, you've got to add them all up. You know, the one that comes with the goods might not be all of it. If you're paying commission back to the supplier, you've got to add that too. Is what are you actually paying in connection with those goods at any point in time needs to be added. Okay, so yeah, valuation, just get the valuation correct. And then you've got origin. Origin is a nightmare, okay? Origin rules are really tricky, so I'm going to do it in 2 slides this time. I'm going to double up on here, so forgive me. So There's no single global definition of origin, what origin means, but there is two types: preferential to reduce a duty bill and non-preferential for policy measures. A country might not want Egyptian goods, and someone might be buying from you in the UK, but they need a certificate of origin in yellow here to prove they're not Egyptian, because they could have been Egyptian products that you've imported. But we're going to focus on preferential origin under a free trade deal, for instance, where you're selling something and it allows them to import duty-free because it's UK origin. A free trade deal is just a sales tool, just a sales tool. It allows you to sell product and your customer to import it duty-free in limited circumstances, or to you to buy and import it duty-free and override the duty in limited circumstances. That's all it is. Think of it that way. It doesn't remove VAT, customs formalities or anything else, just removes duty. And think about the passport of the goods, economic nationality. So if I go to China on holiday and I come back, I'm not Chinese, still British. Yeah, and it's the same for your product. Okay, so think about what's the passport of my goods. I can tell you now, if you're importing anything, distributor, and you're selling it onto the EU, you can't use a free trade deal. Okay, because it's not UK origin. You have to do substantial manufacture, which we'll cover in a minute. But actually, I'll jump down there now on the left-hand side. Is it grown in the UK? Is it a sheep? Is it an apple grown on a British tree? Very easy. They meet the rules of origin. You can sell to those under the 40 trade deals or so we've got around the world, and your customers can import duty-free. Okay, or you can buy from them, companies that we've got free trade deals with, and import duty-free. But the two main ones are number 2 and 3. We'll have it on the next slide. Last substantial transformation. Where did the last substantial transformation occur? If it was in China, it's Chinese origin. It doesn't matter if it's free circulation, you've cleared it into the UK, it doesn't mean anything. It's just sitting in the UK, but it's Chinese product. And sometimes the value added might be able to vary. If you've had so much value in the UK that you haven't transformed the product massively under the tab code, we'll come to it in a minute, that might be enough as well. But anyway, the complex rules of origin determined by the specific product. If you get a commodity code wrong, you might have a wrong rule of origin. So origin and the free trade deal, so the rules for the EU might be different to the rule with the Japanese free trade deal. And to claim it or to offer preference, if you're selling goods under a free trade deal, and you give them this statement here for the EU, by the way, bottom right corner, you have to put that statement on the invoice. If your products originate, that's an illegal statement. Okay, you have to understand if products originate. Then you have to put that on your invoice and make an import duty free. Okay, in other countries around the world, we might be using an EUR1 or an invoice statement. There's lots of ways of doing it, but you've got to be able to prove it and document it with mandated wording. I see companies putting random statements on there. I hereby declare its British origin and things like that. Doesn't mean anything. It's this particular mandated statement or mandated document to prove origin. Okay. And just for interest, for 2 bits I'm going to go for quickly. Primary rule on origin: if you're importing wood, you turn it into a bench. It's changed. The first 4 digits have changed on this free trade deal, so therefore it meets the rules of origin. It's maximum processing. Easy peasy. Okay. This watch here, in terms of the value added one, all the non-originating materials, but aren't British origin, come up to £60. The originating, what I get from the UK here, strap and labour. Labour's always originating. That's £40. Unfortunately, the trade deal says that non-originating product must be less than £50, 50%. No good. I can't now use a free trade deal with the EU. So you've got to look at these sort of rules. Quite complicated, so we can't cover it all here. But at least 80% is diagnosis. We're signalling the things you need to think about if it's relevant to your business, and then you can go and find out. The problems come when you don't know what you don't know. So this session in 1 hour is telling you the sort of things you have to be aware of, so that you can then go and tackle them if relevant to your business. Note number 2 at the bottom: minimum processing doesn't qualify, okay, or seldom qualifies. So if you're just diluting or repacking things like that, forget it. None of these 2 account. You won't be able to use a free trade deal, pretty much. Okay. So yeah, that's the rules of origin. Pillar, so that's pillar 1, 2, 3, classification, valuation, origin, and customs procedure code. Just one slide on here. Why is it coming in or out? You have to put a code on the in-trend or your freight forwarder where. If you're doing a standard import, then it's 40000000, or if you're doing a standard export, it's 10000001. If you're only doing that, that's all you need to know. If you're doing anything special like relieving taxes using inward processing customs warehouse, we'll cover in a minute, then you have to use the special codes on the customs entry and tell your forwarder to use them to claim that special status. Okay, but it's another important box of a customs entry to sort of get your head around, just to understand. As I say, it's not that complicated if you're doing straightforward imports and exports. If you don't know the number, tell your freight forwarder it's coming in for home use, it's staying in the UK, or tell them, and they might be able to give you the code anyway. Don't worry about the 50 export, 300 imports. Most of them might use, but just to be aware that it is an important pillar. Okay. So on those 4 pillars, some quick tips here. I'm going to go over this very quickly. You can read these later, but you've got to understand the product and how to classify. Your freight forwarder can't classify for you. They don't know if your shoes are made out of plastic, PPE, leather, and what percentages. You know, they can't. They're not chemists. They're not vets to classify meat and stuff like that. They don't know that watch skin, you know, alligator skin is an endangered species alligator. You know, it's up to you to classify your product. Oh, slide's gone. Yeah, and don't be biased towards low rates of duty. Or I've got two choices. One's 0%, one's 5%. I use 0%. Don't do that. That's a big no-no. Don't relax on the final digits. You know, it's orange. I know it's a Satsuma, and I'll just put 00090 at the end because I don't know the last digits. Make sure you get all the digits, 8 for exports, 10 for imports, right? Because it's the last digits, but talk about licenses and things. Okay, have a database of approved codes and review them maybe once a year. You know, have a living database. My business cannot use any code unless it's been approved on this spreadsheet. It can be a spreadsheet. You don't have to overcomplicate it. Have a spreadsheet. Here's the code. This is how I got it, and this is the date it was approved and last reviewed. You know, keep that in the business so you don't trade things unknowingly. You've got to do it before you import or export. No point something coming in or going out on a Monday morning at 9 AM and I haven't got a code yet. So get it all done in advance. There. Valuation. Yeah, have a reliable process on there. Be careful, mainly if you're importing. If you're exporting, it's quite straightforward, as I say, your sale price, stuff like that. If you're importing, just make sure if you're buying anything under Incoterms EOF, where you're picking up from someone in China or the EU, make sure you add the freight and insurance on as a number 1 point, and just be aware if you're doing anything special. Related party transactions, transfer pricing, all of those might have to have an influence on valuation, so be careful about that. And then origin tips on there. Don't offer origin, don't claim it upon import unless you have a mandated certificate or declaration and you meet the rules of origin. One quick tip for you: if you're buying from a UK supplier, whether it's a raw material or a finished product you're trading on, you cannot then use a free trade deal. You have to get a supplier declaration of origin to prove that what you bought from a UK supplier, could be Wales, in Wales around the corner or wherever, you've got to make sure that it is British origin. They could have bought it from China. So you've still got to be able to prove what you're exporting, even if you're buying locally. Okay. So yeah, so that's the 4 pillars. And if you remember that first graphic, we had the 4 EORI number on the roof, we had the 4 pillars, classification, valuation, origin, and CPC code, and we have the 2 steps, customs special reliefs and prohibitions and controls. So customs tax planning, we're doing that now. So very quickly on one slide, this is more imports, guys, but it can support you. There's lots of money saving opportunities here for a lot of companies. So I'm going to share this. Keep this slide. You know, in 5 years, 10 years time, you can save fortunes. I've had lots of £300,000 reclaims back from companies and things like that. So basically, when you import tax goods, you've got your classification, valuation, origin, correct. You know you've got to pay tax. There is a duty there. If it's duty free, it doesn't matter. Is there a free trade deal? Make sure you don't miss it. Yes, there is. Great. Okay. There's no free trade deal. So you can use special procedures like customs warehousing and inward processing and other authorisations. They get complicated. They're advanced regimes. Okay, so you can't just send up a form. You have to have your procedures in place. But they allow you to avoid or relieve import tax. It's not tax evasion. It's not avoidance. It's about helping you trade competitively globally. And it allows you to, for example, if you're re-importing anything, it's already been in the UK, it's going out, it's coming back, you shouldn't pay import tax. Okay. If you're re-exporting anything, so you buy something from China, raw materials or a finished product, and it goes off to the EU, you shouldn't pay tax on it. Okay. If I'm storing something for 9 months average stock turn, or a year, or 6 months, or 3 months, it's high value, why pay tax at the point of import on January the 1st? Can I pay it when I sell or use it? Yes, you can. Customs warehousing, for instance. There's other things as well that fall outside of customs. If you're importing something that you cannot buy from a UK producer, not a distributor, a producer, someone who makes it in the quality and quantity you need, you might be able to go to trade policy and get that product duty free, made in the tariff. So there's all these options here, industry specific, you know, local, based on your local competition, based upon domestic production, re-export, re-imports, all these different opportunities here that could allow you to save import taxes. So the main thing is, how much import tax do you pay per year? Is it all legitimate? Can I optimise it? That's the key point from there. Okay, especially if anything you're importing and re-exporting to the EU. Okay. So now we take that hat off. We've got that, you know, EORI number, the 4 pillars, and then we've got the reliefs out of the way. Can I save tax? And now we've got the last step there, going up to those 4 pillars, prohibitions and restrictions. I can't do this much justice because it depends on, you know, you've got different things for vet certificates, health certificates going out to the EU for food. You've got REACH regulations for chemicals, the CE marking, things like that for various things. So I'm going to give you on one slide as much as I can. Basically, just be aware of it. And it's not just things that are obviously dangerous, commercial security compliance risks, HMRC police trade for all those other government departments on the earlier slide, you know, DEFRA and Chemical Medicines Agency, things like that. Products might be banned or need pre-authorization or license. Doesn't mean you can't trade them, but you might need to do something and put it on the customs declaration before you can actually trade it. The commodity code can highlight this on the online tariff. If you search Google UK online tariff, that might give you an idea if there's any things there. There's some examples here. So, you know, certificates for food, you know, health certificates there, as an export health certificate on the right hand side for plant-based products and things like that going out. CE marking on products like this and more. You know, you might have some marking things on there, reach for chemicals, endangered species conventions, if you're doing anything that could be made of endangered species goods. Just be careful. You understand your products and your trading circumstances. Be careful on that. And a quick call out to export controls, which is an important area because it could have criminal implications. On export controls, which are normally high-tech products, okay? So if they're obvious ones, of course, you need a license. Number 2 here, really obvious. No one's going to sidle up to you in the pub and say, well, do you want to buy some weapons or biological nuclear, you know, equipment? But the hard one's number 3. You might have dual-use items, okay? So some Cisco routers that can be used in business, because they're high-tech, those ones, they could need an export license, for instance. So there's things like that to be aware of. And normally, if you're working in these ones at the bottom, these sort of industries, that's a red flag. Doesn't mean there's a problem, but make sure there's not a problem proactively. Deliberately check, okay? So yeah, due diligence related to your products to make sure that the legal requirements of the products are okay, in addition to the customs, tax, and fiscal ones, okay? Okay, a few tips on managing compliance now. So we've got all that down here. We've got the overview, you know, cost, risks and obligations. We've got the Incoterms bit right. That's good. We know who's doing customs entries. We focused in on the customs. We know it's important. And there's penalties and things like that. So what we're going to do now is, first of all, share some common issues. Everyone's in the same boat. Nobody gets this perfect. Okay, so don't panic. That's the first thing. So yeah, a lot of companies, exports outstrip internal resource and know-how. You know, they've been growing so much on the sales. And you know, our procedures and know-how on the back office, you know, hasn't kind of caught up with what needs to be done, particularly with Brexit. You know, that's a common one there. People can't justify an internal expert. I can't afford a supply chain manager on a Monday, or a customs expert on a Tuesday, or an Incoterms expert on a Wednesday. It's really hard to do it. So you end up with a second jobber or no jobber. That's the scary one. You know, I thought Jane was doing it. I thought John was doing it. Oh look, nobody's doing it. You know, that's a bit of an issue there. And sometimes there's an inherited role. So you might have inherited bad practices potentially, depending on what the last person was doing. You know, who knows? So yeah, and then having a lack of internal written procedures and controls. A quick tip: the difference between negligence and genuine error is whether you've got some procedures and controls and you're trying to do the right thing. If you're trying to do the right thing and you can demonstrate it, no point saying I've got 30 years experience in my head. These days, you've got to document it somewhere. It doesn't have to be complicated. Don't have long procedures. If it's too wordy, no one reads them. So it defeats the object. So you've got to have something, though, to back up your business. And actions there, you have a responsible person, so they know who's responsible for it. It might be a hard thing to do. It's a good learning curve, and support them, you know, with know-how, resources. Understand the regulations for your specific goods, okay? If we're dealing with toys and superheroes, then understand that Batman's, you know, human, you know, that sort of thing. Ensure the correct declarations are made. That's the important thing. It's your legal declaration. You've got to make sure it's correct. Take customs taxes as seriously as direct taxes. People spend a lot of time on corporation tax, PAYE. Customs taxes are just as important. Okay, so really important. And demonstrate procedures controls. These are the penalties at the bottom. So you can go back 3 years and say, oh, you claim 0% duty. You've got the wrong commodity code. It should have been 6%. 3 years worth of taxes backdated. And this potential customs civil penalty is £250 to £2,500 per error going back 3 years. If you've done it 100 times, 100 entries, hopefully it'll be a lower amount, but it depends on lots of circumstances on there, okay? And make sure you're not overpaying. You could be overpaying tax for up to 3 years, wrong commodity code, and you can get that money back, okay? It works both ways, okay? A lot of these special regimes we spoke about in a slide a while ago, not only can you save ongoing, okay, I'm only saving £20,000 a year, not a lot, well actually after 5 years, that's £100,000, and you might be able to reclaim, you know, a windfall as well. So there's things like that to think about. Yeah, disallowed export VATs. A quick tip on there, really important for exports. You have to get, or recommend to get, the official copy of the export customs declaration back for checking for customs purposes, but also to evidence export. If you can't evidence export, you have to, if you get audited, they'll charge you about 20% VAT, but use 0 rate for your customer. You can only 0 rate it conditionally upon having evidence of exports. If you've got people collecting from you in the EU or anywhere else and taking it away, how are you going to prove it? So that becomes a bit tricky. They're probably using your IORI number, so you've got to control that process. Customer collections are sort of a hot potato, so spend a bit more time on that. So yeah, The umbrella to protect you from these penalties, if you know when your EORI number is being used, number one, have a written customs clearance instruction, tell your brokers what you're doing and what you want. This is the tariff code, have a clear form, code or valuation, C invoice, whatever it is. Get your customs entries back and check them, and then file them away for 6 years for record keeping. 6 years, I'm talking about VAT as well. So that's kind of the 4 key things you should be doing as a 101 stuff, okay? And then the final slide on this compliance section, if you have a customs audit or survive a customs audit, these are the sort of documents they may ask for, okay? And the way we've covered a lot today, there's not much more than that. Okay, there's a lot of granularity, but those are the key things. So we want to see your orders and contracts and your sales invoices to check the valuation. Oh yeah, you've sold it here, you've done a valuation of £10,000, but I can see the value of the goods is £12,000. Why is that? Or the Incoterm on the invoice says FCA. Why have you not added freight on the invoice? That's what they're looking at. They ask to see your customs broker invoices, because it's an Inco, depending on the Incoterm you use, you might have to add freight to the customs valuation. You want to see how much you paid. Transport document back and prove import or export, tells customs a lot of things there. You have to include insurance price. If you've got insurance policy certificate, they may ask for that. If you've got insurance, you can self-insure if you want, but most people should get insurance policy. It doesn't cost a lot. Cover all shipments, imports and exports to everywhere. If you claim import preference, they'll ask you for that legal declaration or certificate. If you don't have the original, has anyone seen an EUR1, the green copy, don't give it to your customs broker. You have it in your files. You need the original. Okay, if you don't have that, they'll give you that money back. And if you're doing export preferential origin, you're doing that statement on their invoice, they're going to ask you for proof that your products originate. Oh, I bought it from John Smith down the road in Wales. Yeah, but how do you know he didn't get it from China? Oh, I've got a supplier declaration. That's okay then. Okay, products approvals, if relevant. Have you got written clearance instructions to your broker? And you tell customs, oh, no, they get it off the invoice. What, you mean you don't tell your customs broker? No, they do the entry, they're responsible. No, they're not. It's your legal declaration. So, we know that now, but, just be aware of that. Customs entry copies, so you can check them, make sure things. You may have given the right instructions, but could have added a 0, on tab code. And another thing. So there's not much more than that, but that's the sort of thing you might have in your file. It's been in the same place. You don't have to be able to get it within 5 minutes. As long as you've got it somewhere you can see these things, that's a really good start. Okay. Final couple of slides. Miscellaneous. Just a few things I'm just going to quickly call out very quickly. Just random things here. If you're doing consumer export, you can sign up for EU's one-stop shop. Simplifies and facilitates VAT administration for goods under 150 euros in the EU. You sign up for that, you don't have to register in the EU, you can deliver DDP effectively. You don't use DDP for consumers. You can effectively get it there hassle-free for your customers, individual customers. Export VAT 0 rating, because when we were part of the EU, you had to prove export as well, okay, for intra-EU supplies. But the expectation is much higher now, it's a proper export, okay? And we spoke about getting the entry back and checking it. You can get away with transport documents and other things in certain circumstances, but you need the customs declaration for customs compliance anyway, or it's highly recommended. So you may as well go on the official evidence of customs declaration. Okay, and just that warning there about customs collecting, how am I going to get that? Export invoice, that's a key document of international trade, same as a normal invoice, but you'll have some additions on there. Usefully, put your EORI number on there, the Incoterm, tariff code, preferential origin statement if goods qualify. Sometimes adding your overseas EU EORI number and VAT number on the invoice or on the clearance instructions can help facilitate it, because people have got it to hand when the goods get overseas, even though it's your customer doing the import clearance properly. That can sometimes help. And use a customs invoice if there's no commercial transaction. Okay, you can make one up in Word. Customs invoice is fine. Okay, and communications. Ask your buyer, be proactive. By the way, is there anything you need me to provide to help you get your goods through customs your side? Because it will also highlight if they didn't even know that they were doing it. It doesn't matter if they signed up for the right Incoterm and they're responsible for it. They may not understand it, especially after Brexit, because we've got all those traders that we're only doing intra-EU trade before, including in the EU. So ask them, and actually ask your carrier. They might have some useful information on the ground for goods you're sending somewhere else overseas, and say, is there anything else you need from us? And send them a copy of your draft export invoice and paperwork. Is this okay, this format? We're going to use this from now onwards for all our exports. Does it look okay to you? Get it confirmed, and then you can sort of start using that. So last slide, summary, bringing it all in. Kind of a checklist the way I've done this here, guys. I know we're covering a lot. It is a hard, dry subject, so apologies, but it's here for you later to refer back to. So we're covering a lot of important fundamentals, frontline items in short time as possible we mentioned. So think of it from both perspectives. I'm the exporter, but what about the importer? Got that sorted? Or if you're an importer, has the previous exporter selling to me got it sorted? And think about, have I got the 4 contracts of international trade? Have I considered them? Do they align? Are they consistent? Yeah, I'm okay with that. That's fine. Is the Incoterms rule appropriate? Can I do it? Can I fulfill it? Not Xworks or DDP for international trade. Is it properly incorporated into the contract? Yeah. Incoterm, full address, Incoterms 2020 is mentioned. Great, no problem at all. And is it understood by all parties? I understand it. Oh, actually, I'm selling to this little manufacturer who's never done it. I'll double check they're okay with it. Yes, the importer side. Are the 4 pillars okay? Classification code, valuation, origin, CPC code. Do I know what I'm doing before the goods arrive or go out? Relevant customs IDs in place. You need an EORI number to export, and there's got to be a VAT ID in place at source or destination. Particularly, you can't reclaim import VAT destination unless someone's VAT registered. That'd be your customs thing there. Do your customs agents have customs instructions, invoice and the right paperwork? Okay, give written instructions. If there's an FTA, do your goods qualify, and do you have the evidence of that? Do you have the evidence of qualification? If there are import taxes, I know there's an import one. If there are import taxes, can I relieve those import taxes? Am I missing a trick here? Okay. For exports, do I have evidence of export sufficient to zero rate the sale? Okay, as I say, including for customer collections. If there's any product-specific licenses, are they available? Am I okay? Am I compliant there? Has the finalised customs entry been reviewed for checking and record keeping? So you've given me instructions. I better double check it's my legal declaration, put it in my file. And then, do I have just general background supporting procedures and controls within a business? And that was the original agenda. Incoterms, intro there, customs, tax planning, prohibition. So I say we covered a lot. It's not much more than this. There's more granularity, but those are the key points that I wanted to draw out today. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Gavin.
Now, I don't know if do you want to say that? Yeah.
Very, very comprehensive presentation. There's a lot to get through on this subject. I can see that there's questions coming in. There's one here from Peter. Where can I check whether I can import a particular chemical?
So for chemicals, well, first of all, if you're over a ton, you've got the REACH regulations. Let's call out the REACH regulations, REACH, registration, evaluation, authorization of chemicals. Make sure you understand that in terms of being an importer outside of customs. And in terms of regulations, so yeah, check the online tariff code first of all. Make sure there's nothing highlighted on the UK online tariff. If you Google it, it may come up with, it could be a drug precursor, for instance. But just make sure, check what your product code is, whether there's any obvious restrictions there. But I will call out, if you Google REACH, R-E-A-C-H, that's an important area for the chemicals industry in particular. And a quick tip, if you're importing chemicals and you're paying a certain amount of duty on them, they're 6% typically, and you can't buy it locally, as commonly in chemicals, you might be able to go to trade policy and try and get that duty free in the future. It takes about 6-9 months to do, but yeah, okay.
Thank you. Just a comment from myself, really. Animal and plant-based health checks are now devolved to Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. So if you are exporting to the Republic of Ireland through Pembroke Dock, Fishguard or Holyhead, then the Welsh Government are setting up checkpoints as we speak, which will come into being, I believe, in the summer. As a devolved administration.
Yeah, that's right. The export health certificates are tricky, and yes, of course, Republic of Ireland is the same as the rest of the EU in a way. Obviously, we've got the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Northern Ireland, by the way, for Northern Ireland, just for those out there might be wondering, that's all fully under EU rules, the customs. So there are going to be formalities, you know, with the Northern Ireland, but it keeps changing as well. So, yeah.
So a question here from John. We classified into tarpaulins, yet so we custom designing with Lydia scanning, fitted covers for aircraft. How do we get our products reclassified and accepted by all the countries to which we export?
So very hard. Every country, some countries will have different things like an advanced tariff ruling, binding tariff ruling. It's really hard because it's a big area of non-compliance I said on the slides, literally because people have different views, okay, and different countries have different views too. The only legal way of protecting yourself, whether you want to go through the process, is by getting binding or advanced tariff rulings in individual countries. Now that's a lot of hassle to go to, depending upon you know, the values we're talking about. It probably won't be worth it. You could get a binding ruling in one country, i.e. here, or get some feedback and get it here, and then look at the equivalent over there and then run with it. But my question to you is, are you responsible as a legal importer of record in that overseas market? Because you're probably not, unless you've got businesses registered out there you're selling to yourself. If it's your customer out there, I'm not saying you don't care about it, but actually it's your customer's responsibility to do it.
Right. Question here from Gary. Where can I find a list of free trade countries? And although you have indicated the basis of free trade agreements, and also where you can find this information online.
Yeah, there's been changing HMRC publications. You could actually search, to be honest, what I do each time, simply because it keeps changes, I'll put in UK free trade agreement with other countries, and you'll find near the top, I can't remember second or third, one will come up and it will talk about which trade deals the UK's got. So that's probably the best way, because it's a changeable feast at the moment. You know, we've still got loads being entered into play, but you're quite right, because duty rates in the UK and EU even are one of the lowest around the world. Where you might pay 6% here could easily be 20% in another country. So actually that will determine where you might want to sell your products as a starting point, because it gives you that opportunity, doesn't it? You know, I'm going to start going to an English language country and one that has lower duties overseas, rather than going to a 40% duty rate country. So yeah, so that's probably a way to do it. Yeah, so Graham's question there, I can see these now, I just worked out. Yeah, so basically it applies to a product. So as soon as a physical product crosses the border, that's when all this stuff today comes into play. If you're offering a service, doesn't matter, okay? Physical product moving a border for any reason, and the responsible person is the business of the person in the UK. So the EORI number used, we're talking about businesses mainly here. So if you're using the EORI number, that company is responsible, and that'd be a UK registered company with an EORI number, no doubt, in 99% of occasions, and that'd be responsible for it, and it would apply to those goods and all the stuff that goes with it. That makes sense. Whether you arrange that from another country as part, because you're working for another entity, that doesn't matter. It's the company that's responsible. DAT and VAT return. It's banned on DAT. And that return on VAT. Is import VAT always applicable when using EU customs EORI number? So import VAT is a tax. So in the UK, you've got import VAT 20%. Different countries have their own import or goods and service tax, import VAT or goods and service tax system. In the UK, when you're importing, there's a thing called postponed VAT accounting, PVA, which you can Google, and you don't have to actually pay out import VAT anymore. Up until earlier last year, you pay import VAT, you get it back a year later. So it's a cash flow issue. But now you can use postponed VAT accounting if you meet the criteria and not pay import VAT at all. So that does that there. From the EU side, because it's member state level VAT, duties at EU level, VAT is at member state level. Depending where you are, your customer over there or someone will need a VAT number to be able to reclaim the import VAT. Otherwise, it becomes a cost. And you don't want that, do you? At 20, 21, 18%, 22%. So whether that particular country, so France, may have postponed VAT accounting or benevolence. They have a special system, so you might be able to not actually physically outlay the VAT. So you have to go to individual member states. But just a warning: if you're selling over to the EU to businesses, you need 3 things to be able to be an importer: an EORI number in the EU registered, a VAT number in the specific country. There's no point having a VAT number in Germany and then sending from UK to France. It won't work. So VAT number, but you also need to be established now. There's rules of establishment in the EU to be able to import into the EU. So it's a really tricky area to seek advice if you're dealing with customers who don't want to be involved in imports at all, or don't have a know-how, because you need to think further on it and how to do it. Fiscal representation in the EU is one way of doing it as well. Getting there's a tax representative in the EU, in say Netherlands, to help you get goods into the EU in your own name, but that's a bit complicated. Okay.
Right, thanks for the questions. I can see that we've gone past 11 o'clock. Is there any further questions before we wrap the session up? Right, once again, can I thank Gavin for the very comprehensive presentation, and if anybody have got any further inquiries, then please place them on the evaluation forms, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible with any further assistance that you require. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you.